And Scott, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you so, so much.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm like totally fanning out right now. It's like,
well, listen, I heard a lot about you in this bio. We're gonna have to talk. We're going to have to talk. What's up, Andrew? Good to see you. Good to see you. Well, let's get down to it. For those of you who are new to joining us, welcome. 30 at 8:30 is a Instagram live show where every Wednesday night for 30 minutes, just 30 minutes, we hold the space to have candid conversations about structural inequities, violence, and all of the things that disproportionately plague some of our most vulnerable communities. Tonight, we have a special guest who's really always been a genuine supporter of the Crib community, and I really appreciate it from the very beginning. Scott Mckean. So thank you so much for being here tonight, Scott. I really appreciate it.
It's my honor, Tanya. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm going to read your bio and ask questions afterwards, because I got some questions. So Scott Mckean, am I saying that right, Mckean?
Yep.
I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. Okay, Scott Mckean is leading SafeTO, the City of Toronto's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, and supporting the development of the Ministry of Attorney General's Justice Center programs in the City of Toronto. Scott works to enhance community safety and reduce vulnerability for people, families, and places in Toronto's neighborhoods. While at the City of Toronto, Scott has led and supported the development and implementation of many strategies and initiatives, such as the Community Crisis Response Program, Focus Toronto, SPIDER, Youth Violence Prevention, and the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy. Prior to joining the City of Toronto, Scott worked in the community sector, where he developed a number of programs and services for young people, as well as developed the support model for the Out of the Cold emergency program. Outside of community work, he plays drums and paints pictures. Now, I have to ask, what is the medium that you use, and is any of your artwork for sale? I'm just saying.
I kind of use mixed media, so
Nice.
mostly paint, but paint and markers and whatever I can find, to be honest. And I use canvas, but also found materials.
Yeah.
And quietly in the background, I've been building an exhibition. So
Really?
Slowly piecing it together, and I hope to have one soon.
Okay, you need to let the Crib community know, and you need to invite me, because I love the arts. I myself kind of dabble a little bit of oil painting, but I'm not at all like ready for an exhibit. But I would love to support. And
your creativity shines every week on these sessions, Tanya.
Oh,
so
thank you so much. Thank you so much, my friend. So, Crib community, as you know, I want you to give Scott a warm welcome, like only the Crib community can. Please give it up for Scott. Everybody, please give it up for Scott. You get some hearts going up in the chat there. Thank you so much. So, Crib community, as you know, this is actually our last episode before we gather all of our special guests this season together. It went by fast. This is season 4 of 3830, From the Front Lines. But tonight's episode is focused on a public health response to violence, really talking to Scott about the work that's being generated out of SafeTO and what's unique about it, really. So we're going to ask him some questions to get some more insight. All right? He's like, okay. It's just you and I having a conversation with people watching. No big deal.
That's cool. It's cool. I work in the background, so this is exciting.
All right. So honestly, you've done so much, but it's been a constant thread of serving communities, serving some of our most vulnerable communities that experience so much trauma in its many forms. What drew you to this work?
Well, I kind of landed in this work by accident. So it wasn't my natural life plan. Freedom 29 as a rock star just didn't work out. So basically, when I was like had a lot more hair and less weight, I was really, focusing on, music and playing music and in a number of bands and, trying to get records out and that sort of stuff and doing small tours or whatever, just to get the music out there. And I was also working as a visual artist. So I had my own mural painting company and
What?
Stuff like
How
that.
did I not know this? Okay, keep going.
Yeah, it's okay. And that kind of led me to developing some art programs. And that was my entry point into this work, was working with young people and the young people I was working with in some of the things that were going on in their lives. Inevitably you lose them. You lose them to, or they triumph or you lose them, I should say. And, or you lose them to the criminal justice system, you lose them to gun violence. And so that was a driver, and it was an entry point. And right from the beginning, understanding trauma became a huge part of who I was and the ability to listen. And then from there, I kind of jumped into the work, and I worked in a lot of community centers and in communities in the core. And then I kind of went into the sort of homeless and street involved sector, and I worked with individuals there and got to develop some amazing programs and meet, players across the city that are doing amazing work.
Yeah.
And that just kind of, I think the one thread is that I was an entrepreneur and I was a creative spirit. And then I met some amazing people. I see so many that joining the call.
You definitely have a lot of fans.
Yeah, by the time I got to the city, I see Stephen Linton's on here, who's candidate for trustee in Pickering. Everyone should check him out if you're in Pickering. I think, as I came to the city, I built a strong network of people that I just did a lot of amazing work with. And, although I've had the opportunity to lead it, I've always just been a part of it and work with like a community. And that's kind of what brought me into the work. And then as I've progressed the system, in the beginning it was all about frontline and being immersed in community, which is still where my heart is. But also it became about telling the story of all the people, all of the moms that I've worked with that do incredible things, all the young people who've triumphed, some who've experienced challenges. And I try to bring that into the system in the work that I do. And that's here.
It's interesting listening to the response, and because we've been deliberate about asking all of our guests this season this particular question at the very beginning and the same question, another similar question at the end. But it's interesting, the first of all, I love the merging of the art world and the violence prevention and intervention world. I think there's such innovation and creativity that can happen. So it's actually, even though I'm learning this for the first time, it's actually not surprising that this is sort of the culmination of everything, because I feel like you enter the space with such openness for creativity, which allows folks to flourish. So that's really a good trait of yours. Thank you so much. When we think about SafeTO, I want to share with the Crip community a little bit more about SafeTO. What is SafeTO, and how does the initiative support vulnerable communities who are disproportionately impacted by firearm injury and fatality, i.e. homicide?
Well, I would start by saying SafeTO is an evolution from people before me paving the way, thinking differently about using community development and community engagement as a means of violence prevention and intervention. And whether that's supporting, people, from a prevention aspect and empowering communities to build local solutions, or dealing with the unfortunate circumstances if violence occurs. And when SafeTO, the opportunity to do SafeTO came along, it was really on building on that legacy and trying to take forward lessons learned. But also in the city of Toronto, I love this city. I've worked all over it. I've I've lived all over the city as well. And it's amazing and it's incredible. And for as good as it is, there's a lot of inequities in our city that disproportionately impact specific communities. And that prevents them from participating fully in the opportunities and the greatness that Toronto. And so with SafeTO, as we started to think about community safety, we've learned a lot about if you leave those inequities unattended to, they manifest into safety challenges. And communities have told us, like from my entry point into this work and still to this day, that we need to think differently about safety. And historically, it's been about crime or policing and the burden on policing, when really it's about dealing with those inequities that run rampant in our systems, whether it's health, social services, economics, business development, politics.
Exactly.
It's there. And so SafeTO provides an opportunity, first of all, to think differently about safety by bringing the well-being aspect into safety and kind of marrying them and thinking more inclusive about what safety actually means. And then additionally, it provides a roadmap for how multiple systems can come together to advance that agenda of promoting well-being, to advance safety. And really what SafeTO, the outcome after, community has been giving us a mandate, is 7 major goals and 26 actions across those goals that City Council now committed for the next 10 years to pursue and take a long-term approach on thinking differently, acting differently, and being responsive and building with
thinking differently and acting differently and doing it from an interdisciplinary systems sort of lens is so important and critical when we talk about addressing those structural inequities that we're talking about that are inherently violent. It is such a critical response to be operating at this level where systems can have a shared language, a shared umbrella to be able to operate within. And so that is exciting. And it reminds me of the question I always get asked when, particularly with the work of the crib, well, we're really interested in prevention, and folks not sort of understanding that if you have such exorbitant amounts of trauma and grief that has gone unchecked, unacknowledged, unaddressed, you've got to do something about that to intervene, to prevent violence from occurring. And it seems like that similar sort of approach into safety and well-being is being taken with SafeTO, and that's always a good thing from my book. I want to delve a little bit deeper into that approach. SafeTO utilizes a public health approach in that it is focused on the health and safety and well-being of some of our most vulnerable populations. For example, in Toronto's 10-year community safety and well-being plan, in one section of the report, there's a discussion about the reasons and importance, as you mentioned, of SafeTO, which includes responding to challenges of community trauma, community violence, harm and victimization, and injustice. Why is a public health approach an important, or perhaps the right approach to utilizing when it comes to addressing firearm injury and fatality in particular?
Big question. I think at the heart of it, Tanya, first of all, those inequities we talked about, and as they manifest, they impact particular communities differently. And you did ask, about the impact of, homicide victims in the city. So to use that as an example, at the heart of that, there are all these underlying reasons, and I think many of your guests have talked about that. In fact, gun violence is a public health crisis, and we talk about gun violence as a thing, but it's really an outcome. And as part of that outcome, we have to think differently. So to get to that and sort of utilize a public health approach, the first thing I would say is insights. So part of the SafeTO approach is using data better. But I would say, and I would argue that we actually don't need more data. We need more insight. And so research that you've conducted and others have conducted are part of that insight, but also the voices of community.
Yes.
That they need to provide the insight, and we need to center their insights in, how we understand data and how we validate the request that they made of us. And, in our city, there's almost like an awakening. If you think about players, zero gun violence movement, community for zero violence, amending the crack in the sky, so many champions out there. And really, what they're telling us is that, there are problems. And so we have data that we've never linked together. We look at it in isolation. So we're bringing that data together through SafeTO, and we want to work with community to provide better insight into what that data means, to also inform the intervention, which is the next step of a public health approach. And so defining the intervention itself, since SafeTO was passed, we've been building some of the back end infrastructure to support that kind of shift in how we do things. And so that's been a big part, and we've been bringing multiple systems together. And so from a systematic point of view, like, I've never seen this, but the Toronto Police Service Board, the Toronto District School Board, Toronto Community Housing Board, the Toronto Public Library Board, and soon next week, the Toronto Catholic District School Board are adopting SafeTO. So we're using a consistent planning framework.
Nice.
That allows us to work across institutions and bring resident voice into design and implementation of the actions. And so then, you move to the next stage, and, the city has a good track record. Any big institution has burnt people. And so as a big institution, we try to learn from that. And so if you think about initiatives like the Community Healing Project, for example, training young people to be community healers and use healing as a point of violence reduction and building it with them. Project Prosper, which also was developed by consulting, young people who are convicted of firearms offenses. And, based on what they told us, the city has implemented intervention. And then, people like Zia Brown and Mike Hines from Think Twice, or Devon Jones from Yace, are working with, like, Serena Officer and the Community Safety and Wellbeing Unit on building out towards peace and bringing that grassroots community-led perspective, and us trying to figure out how to modify the system to empower that instead of conflict with that. And so as we do all that, we need to then keep working with community and have community as a part of the approach the entire time, so that we can actually identify how we need to keep doing this, or how we do this, and how do we actually do it better. And most important, we need to work with community to tell the story about the process, the design, all the bumps in the road, and have a real honest conversation, and get away from all the finger pointing and just say, this works, this doesn't. Let's just roll up our sleeves and keep going and tell the story constantly. It's the only way, because there's so much finger pointing in this realm of services. And I think when young people are dying at terrible rates, we just need.
You dropped so many gems there, and I just want to uplift them again, so that the crib, they were not lost on the crib community tonight, this evening, which is gun violence is an outcome of a systemic issue. It's an outcome. But also the other gem that you dropped is modifying the system to respond to what the community says it needs. What an awesome perspective. Modifying the system to be able to respond to the needs of community, versus the community modifying or morphing or adapting itself to fit to the system. I don't know. Makes sense. I want to ask another question related to your engagement in particular with community members, and so many of them that you mentioned that are doing incredible work. A City News release in July 2021 stated that SafeTO represents the culmination of extensive community consultations, some of which I know some of our students were a part of, with city staff and 1,500 diverse residents from different Toronto neighborhoods. Why was it important to utilize this approach in particular? And what were the challenges and the success stories with utilizing this approach with community consultations? Oh, hang on, Crip Community. We got a little drag, Uh-oh. Production? Got a little drag, Scott. So sorry, Crip Community. Scott, can you hear me?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people on this call right now who taught me like the most basic principle.
Got a little drag.
Residents will tell you what.
I think so. Okay. All right. Antonio's going to check in with you, but
was it me on my?
Did you get the full question there?
I did. So sorry. Am I back?
Yep, you're back. You're back.
Okay, great. Technology.
Right.
So you know, there's so many people on the call, tonight that have taught me a lot about community work, and some of the, as much as I talk about the system stuff, the most basic premise is residents will tell you what they want and what they need, and that's something that's, I learned in the early days of working with folks in the community crisis response program, and throughout my all the work that I've been involved in. But that's at the heart of it. And it was really important that we talk to diverse groups. And so we've talked to people who have been victimized, people who victimized others. We talked to people who are incarcerated. We talked to judges, lawyers, doctors. And it was really important because a lot of stuff we were coming and saying, we've learned this over the years, and it was a validation of that we heard people and we weren't starting from scratch. We also learned a lot of other things along the journey. And, for example, one of the biggest themes that came up through the development of SafeTO was this concept of identity and belonging. Even though we were talking about human trafficking or gun violence or mental health crisis, this was a consistent theme through every consultation that we did. And although that when you're meeting thousands of people and that's a consistent theme, is really something there. And whether it was about due to structural racism in our systems, whether it was due to the inability to participate, whether through whatever, not acceptance of who you are, that was something that it was really important, from a trauma informed lens, that we brought that into SafeTO. Yes. And then I think it was also just really important to have us not lead it all. So there were some individuals that led their own consultations that we were guests. And I worked with a young woman, I believe who was on the call, named Bilquis Mohammed, who was my co-partner in
Bilquis.
Yeah, a shout out to Bilquis. And we would do these marathon days of consulting community, and then sit quietly after, before we called it a night at 9 or 10 at night, and try to digest everything that we had. And sometimes it was laughing and that was the best idea, and sometimes it was crying or quietly trying to take this all in. And it really talks about, really taught us both, I think, that there's no one way to do this. Who's being vocal, who's not, and who you're speaking to, who you're not, who reaches out after the consultation and didn't feel comfortable in the space, and
Yeah.
to design your approaches. And so
Mm-hmm.
it really was a journey.
It's interesting again, just you know, I'm just going to highlight some mic drop moments that you just gave. Centering the voices of community first. The community will always tell you what it needs. All we have to do is listen. That's number one. And the other, I lost my train of thought because it was so profound, but just really talking about the process of listening and letting that process absorb and inform the roadmap, if you will, of the work, which is so important. And these things take time, but it's necessary. Also working from a trauma-informed lens. But I actually just gave a presentation where I talked about, and I want to quote one of our guests, Dr. Onye said, you know, if you don't know racism, it knows you. And really understanding that whether we're talking about human trafficking, whether we're talking about structural inequities because folks don't have access to clean drinking water or affordable housing, or we're talking about homicide or firearm fatality, the trauma that often happens to Black and Indigenous and racialized communities first and foremost and consistently is structural racism. And if we don't recognize that piece of it, along with all the other traumas, then we're missing the mark, and you have lifted that into the conversation tonight. So I also appreciate that. Appreciate that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe 8:58. Okay. What sets SafeTO apart from other safety and well-being initiatives? What sets it apart? And I think you've alluded to it, but what sets it apart?
What I would say is it's not a program. So SafeTO, often people think of it as a program, and SafeTO is almost an umbrella strategy where multiple interventions can come together. And in our systems, and I've been a part of running programs. There's often a number of initiatives that happen parallel, interconnected, or in isolation of each other. SafeTO is a response to what residents talk to us about. Is those things need to come together because the issues that we face are real, and they're not happening where I go to this program and this program. They're interconnected, and what you do over here, and what you know, for example, if you're responding to homicide victims, you need to be able to take what you learn and advise the prevention-based work that hopefully prevent that work. And I think that's what sets SafeTO different, apart from that.
Okay. All right now. I love it. And this question, these last two questions are questions that we ask of all our guests this season. When we think about what it takes to support communities overwhelmingly impacted by multiple forms of trauma, firearm injury and fatality is where I'm focusing at the moment. But as you said, multiple forms of trauma and violence. How do their experiences impact you, a frontline worker, but also working to make these systems communicate with each other under one umbrella? But where do you go for support, and what do you still need to keep going?
It's an interesting question because for most of my life, I was on the ground, embedded in communities consistently, and now I'm a little more removed. And so I think part of it is, first of all, anyone who's doing this work they feel what's happening in the community, feel whether it's when you're celebrating and triumphing with community, you're inspired by that. And when communities hurt, you feel that. And many of the people who I work with have their own lived experience and in the issues that we're actually trying to address, and we feel the loss. And so my role over the years has transitioned to support people who are doing the work embedded in communities daily by providing an ear and voice, and and being there for people, but also, again, like, one of the reasons why I took my work is to be able to bring those voices into some of the conversations that I now get to be part of, and to make sure that that's there and honor that. And so that's a big part of it. I also think, it's good to have your outlets, and so I paint pictures and play drums, and it's not unlike me to lock myself in the studio and go haywire on shit.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
And and find a balance. And I also think, there's a community that does this work, and often people who are embedded in faith that isolate themselves because they feel that they can't show the impact. But I've learned over the years the impact's going to show regardless. And so, from someone like me, my job is to check in with people and check in that they're doing okay, and then help work it through. And if I'm struggling, then I'm going to reach out to some people as well.
I love that. Just holding the space for one another, but also something, again, that I have really valued these conversations that I've had with guests, always, but this season, it's just incredible people who do the work in service to others. We're working in systems, like you said, that have been harmful to the people that we serve. But yet we are here, and we are consistently here with the focus and the commitment to amplifying their voices. So I appreciate you. Appreciate the work that you're doing. Really, really do.
Hey, that goes both ways, Tanya. I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and a lot of your work has been a huge inspiration in the development of SafeTO, and as well with the implementation. And congratulations on your work on invisible wounds. Just right the last minute on my way to the actual premiere to deal with an emergency, but in speaking to so many people who were there.
All right.
That's what we do when I talked about storytelling earlier. And so, thank you for what you're doing, and continue. And I hope that the implementation of SafeTO will allow your work to continue and prosper, and as well as other grassroots and community groups out there.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. You haven't missed it. We're gonna actually do some viewings in the community. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. We're doing that. But thank you so much for saying that, Scott. I appreciate it. The last question I have is, what is your greatest hope? What is your greatest hope for SafeTO?
There's so many. I think one of them is that we do what we say we're going to do, as a city and as a system. And I think that's a big part for me, because that was a huge part of the consultations, is don't just do this and then go back to business as normal. And so to honor that, I think if we can actually change how people think about safety, and we can understand, not only to be trauma informed, but to build our capacity as a city to understand it, be responsive to it, and really grasp what it means to experience trauma from a system point of view and from a provider point of view, then we will transform the city.
Powerful words. Thank you so much, Scott. I can't believe how quickly the time went by.
I know.
It's really fast. But that just means we have to find more opportunities to do this, and we will. We've been talking about it for a while, so we will. But I just want to, again, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for, again, uplifting the voices of so many. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my honor. And thank you to everyone who consistently turns out to your events. It's insane. It's awesome.
You've got some fanfare in the chat there. Just hearts, and thank you for all the work. Look, thanks, Scott. Thanks for all the work you do. Just know if you can see it. But Crib community, as always, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Stay tuned, because next week is the big crescendo, where we're bringing all the guests together to have. Now, I don't know if you've been watching the whole season, but y'all, I say this every season, but it's about to be on. I mean, we have all the guests coming together for 1 hour. We're not going to be here on Instagram. We're going to be streaming via webinar via Zoom. And so we'll be sure to broadcast all of those details for next week, where we're again going to meet for 1 hour, 8:30 to 9:30. So it'll be, a little bit hour-long show. So make sure to tune in and join us. But again, thank you so much for coming out tonight, Scott. Thank you, Crib community. And as always, from our crib to yours, stay safe and keep well. Good night.